1999 deadline. It looms. Is peace possible? An Israeli view and a Palestinian view. There isn't a lot of euphoria following the Y agreements. We certainly all recognize that while there's a tremendous consensus on a desire for peace, that is not identical to two competing claims of justice. And we're very, very fortunate to be joined this evening by two very seasoned observers and participants. As you know, our original Palestinian guest was not able to be with us. We have a wonderful substitute this evening who is an American citizen, Palestinian descent, Dr. Najat Arafat Khelil. She is the National Vice President of the Palestinian American Congress and the National President of the Arab Women's Council. She received her bachelor degree in physics and chemistry from Cairo University. In 1962, she was awarded a Fulbright fellowship to work on her master's degree at Ohio State University. In 1973, she received her PhD in nuclear physics from North Texas State University. She's taught at several universities, including George Washington University near Washington. She's at present a resident of Potomac, Maryland. It's awfully good of her to join us this evening at the last minute. We're absolutely delighted to represent a Palestinian perspective on this most vexing problem. All of you have received, I think, or most of you, a brief resume of our second presenter, Mayor Schlomo Lahat, who has had two wonderful careers in the state of Israel. He joined the movement for the Haganah early, age 14 or so, very young, fought in the War of Independence, joined the Israeli Defense Forces when they were first founded, was in them for 25 years, rose to the rank of Major General, and had a series of most impressive and responsible commands. And then upon leaving the military, was elected, joined the Liberal Party, and was elected mayor of Tel Aviv. He was elected to 4 terms, a total of 20 years, when he voluntarily retired. And the list of things which he's done for Tel Aviv, I assure you, is long and most impressive. And since retiring from his mayorship, he's gone into the private sector, and he serves on a number of very important national commissions and has maintained a deep interest in the peace process. I should also note very briefly that we want to thank Mr. Ron Young, who's with us this evening, who's with the United States Interreligious Committee on Peace in the Middle East. It's under that organization's auspices that Mayor Lahat has come to the United States for this visit. And they're doing, I think, very impressive work in an area which is of interest not only to Israel and Palestine, but to the United States and I think mankind beyond that. With that said, let me tell you what our format is. We'll have both of our guests will speak for perhaps 15 or 20 minutes, and then they'll ask one another a gentle question or two. And then we'll open the floor up for questions. I'm going to let ladies go first in this instance. Dr. Khelil.
Thank you very much for your introduction, and thank you for asking me, although, like I said, it was just last night, and hopefully I'll be able to fulfill your needs, and I'll be willing to answer the questions of things that I wouldn't cover in my presentation. So I guess you said in your introduction that it is a very delicate and difficult situation, and every time we have an agreement and we have a meeting and we hope for the best. But I'm gonna say things that might not be too optimistic, But again, when I look at the audience here tonight and see how many people are interested in listening to what we're saying and what's happening, this means that we will never give up hope, and we will always be hoping that a solution that is just and viable and comprehensive will come to the area, as long as you are still interested and working at it, and that's what's important. So even if the situation is not perfect, but with the efforts of the people and interest, I am sure we will be able to convince the leaders that we have to have a solution. So with that said, I'm going to be just reading, if you don't mind. Of course, 5 years has passed since the signing of the Declaration of Principles on the White House lawn between the Palestinians and the Israelis. That day, the hopes were raised, and everybody was hoping that progress will lead towards a lasting and peaceful solution. Palestinians in particular were hoping that this will result into the establishment of a Palestinian state and the end of occupation, and also to improve their living conditions and quality of life. But so far, those hopes mainly went unfulfilled. Unfortunately, until the early October of this year, the Middle East peace process was in danger of collapse and almost totally dead as a result of several unilateral actions taken by Israel and some Palestinian extremists that violated all the agreements. Several factors contributed to the stalemate and breakdown of the negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. As a result, the two parties were and still are facing a crisis of confidence that could destroy what has been achieved so far and could bring back the atmosphere of animosity that existed before '93. And definitely we don't want that to happen. But despite the deep frustration and disappointment, many people on both sides still support the peace process. We believe that only through the process of direct negotiation that began in Madrid, that we can achieve a lasting and just peace based on the UN Security Council resolutions 242 and 338 and the principle of land for peace. These are the principles upon which all Arab-Israeli agreements are based so far. It is already clear that the task of guiding the peace process to a successful conclusion will not be an easy one. The United States, in its self-chosen role as the principal sponsor of the process, has its work cut for it. Not only is the task great and difficult, but one of the parties clearly not in cooperative mood. In fact, Israel was acting in a manner that caused embarrassment to the United States and caused alienation from the rest of the world. The United States, as the sole sponsor of the peace process, should take upon itself the first and most urgent task, namely to see through the implementation of the signed agreements to which the United States is a co-signature. One thing we know for sure, that the majority of the Palestinians and Israelis believe that the current situation is totally unacceptable, and the risks of continuing with the status quo are too high, and everybody aspires to a better future. Before we go into discussing the latest agreement, the Wye River Memorandum, I would like to mention a few things that caused the stalemate in the last 19, 20 months, and the situation that was current, and most of that situation still present until today. As we all know, in the previous agreements, the Oslo I and Oslo II, Oslo I and Oslo II put a framework to what we know as the interim agreement regarding redeployment of Israeli forces in accordance of the land for peace equation. This concerning the withdrawal and redeployment. This part of the agreement was to take place in 3 phases, with the assumption that by implementing each phase, the two parties would build mutual confidence. So far, only one phase has been completed. Phase 2 was started but not finished. Now, after 9 days of marathon at the Y River plantation, we hope it will continue because Phase 2 was kind of ironed out as scheduled. And Phase 3 should be completed before the final status negotiations can take place. And all of this should be done by May 4th, 1999. We are hoping for a miracle, at which time the Palestinians will declare an independent state with East Jerusalem as its capital. That is concerning the redeployment. Concerning the settlements and the land confiscations, several unilateral actions taken by Israel that violated the Oslo Agreement, the land confiscations, expansions of the existing settlement, and building new settlements, especially around Jerusalem, and paving of bypass roads, all are acts intended to change the demographic and political nature of the West Bank and to create facts on the ground that will jeopardize and predetermine the outcome of the final status negotiations. Since Oslo, just for the record, Israel has confiscated about 150,000 acres of the lands in the West Bank. Ironically, that until this last agreement, until before the redeployment that took place 2 days ago, last Friday, the land that was transferred to the Palestinian National Authority until last Friday, which was 3% of the West Bank land, was only 42,500, which is about 1/3 of the land that was confiscated for settlements and for building of the bypass roads. Of course, refraining from such acts would be an essential element for building the confidence between the two parties. Concerning the security, when we talk about security and think only of Israel's security, it does not help. Palestinians also are concerned about their security. America promises Israel security but cannot deliver. The reason the Palestinians are not promised what they need most in return, the statehood. Such a promise could induce the Palestinians to work harder for Israeli security. The security pressures, again, that Israel and the US are putting on the Palestinian National Authority are the greatest danger facing the question of democracy in Palestine. On one hand, Israel pressures the PNA to make arbitrary and summary arrests and to shut down institutions without an illegal basis. On the other hand, such acts threatens the reputation of the Palestinian National Authority and the Palestinian people as a whole to be looked upon as violators of human rights and the rule of law. A sound diplomatic strategy by the US could mobilize interest on both sides. And here I would like to quote from an editorial that was in the Washington Post almost a year ago, where it said, "Such a strategy would aim at strengthening Israeli security and establishing a Palestinian state. Only a strategy that offers each side a chance to attain its prime goal can give that side the incentive to satisfy the goal of the other," unquote. Talking about the economic status of the Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, initially, it appeared that the Oslo Agreement would be coupled with an organized process to improve the living conditions in the West Bank and Gaza Strip. But what actually happened was the opposite. The World Bank and other financial institutions stated the gross national product in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip has declined by 18 to 30% from 1991 through 1996. Just to give an idea, the average annual income of a Palestinian is between $1,200 to $1,400. This is annual, while in Israel is 17,000. According to the United Nations Special Coordinator for the Occupied Territories, the Israeli practices of closure, The Palestinians in Gaza, and the autonomous areas in the West Bank are economically worse today than before Oslo. The restrictions placed by Israel on the free movement of Palestinian people and goods, especially during the time of closure, which is a form of collective punishment, is the main cause of the declining economy in these areas. According to the United Nations Special Coordinator for the Occupied Territories, the Israeli practice of closure of the West Bank and Gaza is the principal cause of the worsening economic situation of Palestinians and the main obstacles to Palestinian economic development, end quote. The West Bank and Gaza has been closed militarily for a total of 340 days since the signing of the Oslo Agreement. It is estimated that the daily economic loss resulting from the closure to be $6 million. The total loss of income, accordingly, is about $1.8 billion in the period between 1993 and 1996. What's so ironic that this sum is significantly more than the total amount of donor assistance during the same period, which means the money that the donor countries been giving was less than the loss that happened from the closure. And if you're familiar with the closure, the situation of the closure now is worse even than before Oslo. Because before, the whole West Bank was one unit under occupation. And when there is a closure after, of course, we can argue why, the whole area will be closed and people will be still free to move from one area to other. Now with the areas that are under Palestinian Authority control, which are what they call Area A's, which are little polka dots in the West Bank, when there is a closure, each one of these areas is closed alone, which means people in Nablus cannot communicate with people in Ramallah or in Bethlehem or anywhere because they are within enclaves that are enclosed separately. A peace process which leads to Palestinians being worse off materially can only lead to frustrations and extremism. Now we come to the Wye River Memorandum. After 19 months of this bleak picture, we come to the Wye River Memorandum. If we review what has been published, because we did not get all the little details, we really do not find any earth-shaking new development. The most important aspect of it is that the two parties convened, the talks were resumed, and the US played a very positive and somewhat aggressive role in getting the two parties to reach an agreement. Now, according to the interim agreement, like we said, the first and second redeployment should have been finished, and the third redeployment should have been in progress. But what happened with the Wye Memorandum for the third phase of redeployment, and I'm quoting that, and it was put in the hands of a committee to address the question, which means there was no details of how to do it, it just referred it to a committee. And I'm going to say something that Dr. Hanan Ashrawi said yesterday, sign first and negotiate after. I'm just using her sentence. Then concerning the security, also in the Wye River Memorandum, demands were put only on the Palestinian side. The document includes security safeguards designed to protect Israelis from attacks by Palestinians, but ignored the threats posed by Israeli soldiers and settlers alike to Palestinians. So this is, again, and also to frame it in terms of land for security, and to include, if you read the agreement, it says almost individual security, which is almost impossible to achieve. It's, in a way, if we want to compare, we could hold President Clinton responsible for the killing of the abortion doctor in Buffalo, New York. So this is the thing that we cannot really guarantee individual security and combine it with fulfilling the agreement. The other issue that was discussed was the Palestinian charter, the PNC charter, and now the PNC will meet, PNC, the Palestinian National Council, will meet again to remove for the second time the specified articles of the charter. But at the same token, the Palestinians would have liked to get something in return, at least a recognition of their right to self-determination and independence. For the permanent status negotiations, the Y memorandum states, I'm quoting, the two sides will immediately resume permanent status negotiations on an accelerated basis and will make a determined effort to achieve the mutual goals of reaching an agreement by May 4th, 1999. Hopefully, the two sides will move fast towards implementing the second and third phases of the memorandum and thus get to the permanent status negotiation. So that's what we're hoping, that within 5 months they will do much more than they were able to do in 19 months in implementing things that were agreed upon 2 years ago. So there is a tremendous hope in that. But at the same time, if we look at the items to be discussed at the final status negotiations, we need definitely a miracle to think that they could reach agreement to these items in how many, 5 months? The first issue that is left for the final status negotiations, and that's the reason they were left, because like these were the red herrings, they don't want to touch them, so let's table them till the end. And now, you know, definitely we're going to come to the time when we have to face them. The first one is the issue of Jerusalem. Both sides consider Jerusalem to be at the heart and soul of their existence. So for Jerusalem, so far, Jerusalem is closed city for Palestinians. It has been so. It has been closed for Palestinians since 1993. No Palestinian except those who carry a Jerusalem ID card and those who can get, and those who have a temporary and hard to get permit can enter Jerusalem. Thus, Muslims and Christian Palestinians cannot go to worship in their most sacred holy sites. As a result of closing Jerusalem, also for Palestinians who want to move from one part of the West Bank, like from the southern part to move to the north part, they cannot pass through Jerusalem. So they have to take a road that is dubbed the road from hell, because it is so dangerous and so windy. And it usually takes 2 hours for a Palestinian to go from Bethlehem to Nablus, for instance, while it could have taken less half an hour if they would pass through Jerusalem. And I'm sure you've seen so many incidents where women give birth on at checkpoints, or people die because they were not able to reach the hospitals when there's an emergency in time. The same thing for Palestinians. I'm not going to go through all these, you know, for not being able to build on land they own in Jerusalem, and if they build without a permit, because they cannot get a permit even if they applied. It might take 10 years before they get a permit. It costs $20,000 to get a permit if they ever got it. But if they decided, okay, well, the family expanded and they need to build. So once they build, if they don't have a permit, the house will be demolished. And there are several incidents of that, and we've seen so many of them, even they made it to the Washington Post. Also, the Palestinians who carry Jerusalem ID cards, usually when it comes time to renew them, so many of them, there's a rule that you have to be schooled, to be living, to be working. So in general, there's somehow to get away around not renewing them. Again, Palestinian Americans who carry the Jerusalem ID card and have American citizenship, they're asked to relinquish their American citizenship if they want to keep their Jerusalem ID card. They have to choose one or the other. So these are the issues of Jerusalem that need to be discussed with the final status negotiation. The second issue is the issue of refugees, which is, as we know, there are about 2 million Palestinian refugees living in diaspora. And of course, according to UN resolutions that are the basis of the negotiations, that's the quote that the Palestinian refugees should have the right to return and or compensation. So this is going to be one of the hot issues in the final status negotiations. A third one is the water. The water is a very, very important point because of the, the limited resources. Also, again, Palestinians cannot dig for wells on their land without a special permit. And if we look at the consumption, an Israeli living in a settlement consumes at least 3 times as much cubic meters of water as a Palestinian living in the West Bank. The fourth issue is the issue of borders. Again, this is a very difficult issue that we cannot even talk about now. The fifth issue is the issue of settlements, which we mentioned that with the Y memorandum, there was no mention whatsoever of the settlements. When we met with the Secretary of State a couple of weeks ago and we asked her, she said it falls under unilateral action. But when Netanyahu gave orders to start building at Jabal Abu Ghanim, all what they said here in the States, that they said that was a bad decision. So this does not really fall within the agreement. At the same time, I don't know about, what I read in the papers and I read through emails and sometimes from other communications, that now Sharon is giving instructions to the settlers to go and grab as much land and hilltops as they can before reaching the negotiation, the final status negotiation, so there will be no chance to give these lands back. That's what they told the press when they went to evict them from areas. Some of the settlers went to confiscate. So one positive aspect that, we know that the airport will be open tomorrow, hopefully. We keep our fingers crossed until tomorrow comes. So the Gaza airport will be open tomorrow. I just got an email from my brother who was telling me, because I'm hoping to go to Gaza next month, hopefully to attend this big event with Clinton. So I sent an email to my brother saying, I might be going to Gaza. I hope I'll come and see you in Amman. So he just answered me back and he said, well, hopefully you can fly because there will be 2 flights daily between Gaza and Amman. So that encouraged me to really work hard on going. So I could also go, not only visit my family who still live in Nablus, but also those who live in Amman. Of course, I'm not gonna attempt to give solutions, but I will just say a few suggestions that might help. These are my modest ideas of saying that the most important thing is to end the closure, because if Israel would end the closure, this will enhance Palestinian workers' access to Israel. It will improve trade flow, and the movement of business and people. It will establish better transit arrangement between the West Bank and Gaza. And by opening the airport also, that will help. Plus, it will encourage outside investment also by changing the laws of trade and import and export. Of course, everybody says, how come investors, especially Palestinian Americans or Palestinians in the diaspora who are some of them are very rich and very successful businessmen, even Palestinian businessmen think of it as a business, Nobody really think of just going and throwing their money. And with the closure, it's not really very inducive and encouraging for people to invest. And we say that progress will require a major effort by Israel, the Palestinians, and the international community, and people like you and us here, to strike at both the political and the economic roots of the current situation. On the political side, we must work to rebuild trust and set the stage for the implementation of the agreements. All existing agreements, including those on further deployment of Israeli troops in the West Bank, should be implemented on full. On the economic side, so far, only Israel benefited economically from the peace agreements. Israel's economy is flourishing due to the increased trading with several countries that recognized Israel after 1993. Add to that the opening of the Arab markets to its products and the lifting of the secondary and tertiary boycotts on goods. Meanwhile, the Palestinians find themselves moving further from their goals. So helping the economy in the Palestinian sector is a very important factor to achieve a peaceful, just settlement. In conclusion, I would like to quote also from a speech given by Secretary Albright sometimes last year, where she said, "Partners have obligations to make their partners stronger, not weaker, to act in the spirit of peace, to take into account the needs and views of the others, to focus not on creating problems, but on removing obstacles to peace, and to contribute to an atmosphere in which violent extremes are neutralized and the roots of trust may grow," unquote. So after looking at the other, see the stereotyping and understand how it came about, will we find in that mirror how much the other has suffered as we have, and can acknowledge their hurt, and thus the healing process begins. By emphasizing the similarities between our two people and realizing the positive side of our future together, we can create a peace, a place where our children can live on a land to which both can belong. And thank you.
Good evening. Can you hear me? Yes, okay. Mr. President Burd, Dr. Khelil, dear friends, I'll try to stick to this experience of this French professor who, excuse me, who spent a sabbatical year in Cambridge, not in the United States, in the United Kingdom. And when he was through, the British professors gave a farewell party to him, and he, in spite of being French, he admired very much the university and the professors and the academic standards and the knowledge, everything. He said to the people at this farewell party, "One thing, you British people, which I couldn't get used to, is your measures. So I made myself a certain sign by saying that the person who thinks by the inch and speaks by the yard should be kicked by the foot." So I'll try to make it short, and then we'll go to the program. I just wanted to remind ourselves, and I'm going to give solutions. The second point, you should know, I am, after leaving the city, with my background, I am a chairman, a president, they call it, of an association called the Council for Peace and Security. Now, what does it consist of? We are about 1,200 high-ranking, retired officers from the armed forces, from the rank of full colonel, lieutenant, brigadier general, major general, lieutenant generals. We are people who served in the armed forces between 25 and 40 years. We went at least through 5 wars, and most of us were combat officers. And we know, Gesundheit, that that wars do not bring any positive, any good thing to human being, neither to the winner and either to the loser. It only creates hatred and bloodshed and terrible things. And at the moment that you can avoid it, you should do it and try by all means, because this is the only positive way that you can treat and handle and with people. And we are, all of us, we have 6 points in common. I'll tell you briefly. This association, we do not belong to any party. We couldn't care less about right or left or middle. What we care is for the peace treaty. What we say is as follows. First of all, security a peace is needed for the security of the state of Israel. Point number 2. If we will not initiate very quickly a peace agreement with the Palestinians and our neighbors, there will be a certain war initiated by other countries in the Middle East where atomic weapons and biochemical weapons will be involved that will not bring good to anybody. Point number 3, to govern or to dominate a different society, nation, country is something which ruins your human values, even if you are right. And therefore, the sooner the better you can get rid of it and avoid it, you should do it. Point number 4. In order to achieve peace, we must compromise, which means to give back land, and even if there will be no other way, to take down some settlements. I'll refer to it later on. Point number 5. A Palestinian state will not jeopardize the security of the state of Israel. And therefore, the sooner the better, it should be given and to the Palestinians. Jerusalem should remain the capital intact of Israel. There will be, of course, freedom of faith and religion, and everybody can come and pray day and night wherever he wants. Yeah. But I'll explain to it why it should be done. These are the 6 points that we are doing. We are a very active association. We demonstrated in favor of Oslo A and Oslo B. And just imagine, I mean, first of all, I think it's a kind of an organization which doesn't exist and didn't exist in any other country in the world. 1,200 high-ranking officers. You can just imagine when you see a demonstration of 300 generals and colonels, who are demonstrating from peace. Usually people of with this rank, I mean, they are extreme, and they think that they can achieve and do and fight, etc. We think the opposite. So this is just the background from where I speak to. Now, about the solution of the peace agreement. First of all, as I said, we think that the sooner the better, a Palestinian state should be given to the Palestinians in the borders of 67, with a few small minor modifications, but basically the West Bank on one hand, Gaza on the other hand. There should be a certain way to combine between both of them, free, without any limitation. This should be declared the Palestinian state, given to the Palestinians. Second point, the settlements. I must start differently. We should not forget, and we should know the background of the conflict. And we all know that due to our respect, and on the 29th of November 1947, there was a declaration given by the United Nations, still I think in Lake Success, where they decided that Palestine is going to be divided into 2 countries, an Arabic state and a Jewish state. It was almost 2.5 years after the Holocaust, when we have lost 6 million of our people. And people wanted to come to Palestine in those days, but they were denied by the British. And they decided this is going to be the state. We were not satisfied, we were not happy. We accepted, we said, if this is the solution of the majority of the nations of the world, we accept it. The Arabic people, Palestinians in Palestine, didn't accept the solution. And they initiated the war. And sorry, we won. And since then started the conflict. This is something which we should never forget. Because if they would accept the solution, we wouldn't fight, and everybody would be happy and satisfied with the limits and the borders that we have. And then all the Arab countries join in, and I don't have to repeat, of course, the history, but we know the background. So about the settlements, yes, and then in 67 was the war when Jordan jumped in, and the Palestinians encouraged and participated, but again, happened what happened. We have the settlements. If we would be able to take down the settlements, we would be for it. But we must be realistic, because we want to achieve, and we want to achieve the peace, and we want to proceed with the peace. We have today, and the settlements, approximately between 140, 130,000 Jewish people who are settlers. We have 1 million Arabs in the state of Israel, and they are marvelous people. So for the time being, in order to proceed with the peace, basically the settlements should remain. There are some settlements which are isolated. They should be taken down. It will not be simple, but we will do it. Point number 3. The Palestinian state, as I mentioned, should be demilitarized for the time being, but demilitarized from, Palestinian army and from an Israeli army. We don't need to have any Israeli soldiers, not on the Jordan and not in this valley and not in the other valley, nothing. We trust the Palestinians. They can keep and guard their own country. And therefore, we should not be there. I said about Jerusalem, one point about Jerusalem, which we shouldn't forget again. In 1948, after the War of Independence, Jerusalem was divided. Half was, belonged to King Abdullah, Jordan, and half was by the Israelis. Ben-Gurion, the prime minister in those days, took immediately his government from Tel Aviv and moved it to Jerusalem and declared Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. King Abdullah remained in Rabat Amman. If Jerusalem is so holy and so important, he should have taken his government from Amman and moved to Jerusalem. As a matter of fact, it was not done. And with all due respect, Arab people, they have Mecca and Medina, and they have something. We have only Jerusalem, and Jerusalem and Israel are identical in our tradition, in our faith, in our religion, and at least, as Dr. Khelil said, partners should appreciate and consider each other, not only see their own angle. About the refugees, of course, the Palestinian state, they can take in anybody and how many people they want without any question. There should not be limitations on refugees. They want 2 million, 3 million, 100 million, everything is open without any problem. There should be clear borders between the Palestinian state and Israel. Now, about Syria. We didn't mention it, but we should know that with Syria also there is a problem. And the president of Syria, Mr. Assad, he is not eager, as what we can see, to have peace. But we in the Council for Peace and Security think that if he will be ready, we should retreat from the Golan Heights. Not immediately, but gradually in 2 years. The Lake of Galilee should remain under the part of Israel. About the water resources, we should have an agreement for both sides, and it can be done for the benefit of 2 sides. About the United States of America, your role, what you should play. First of all, you should increase the amount of people who are in favor of the peace treaty, by all means. And go and demonstrate, because if there will be no peace in the Middle East, it will endanger the peace in the whole world. And this is something which we cannot allow ourselves. The second point, I think that America should help the Palestinian state with money in order to improve the standard of living of the people. Because what Dr. Khelil said, it's true. It's a terrible situation in which much must be changed. And we don't want to see Palestinians coming to clean garbage in Tel Aviv. They are capable people, they are intelligent people. If they will get the means, they can establish and industrialize a country, and there will be an excellent competition between the 2 states. It will be for the benefit of the whole Middle East. And I'm sure that both countries will establish the Middle East in a length of time of 15, 20 years. It will be something unique. It will resemble, to a certain extent, Switzerland. And when I said America, I mean not only America. America should, as the leader of the world, recruit money from all over the world, including Israel. We must help and support the Palestinians to improve as fast as possible their standard of living, and they should do it. Here is 2 points which I would like to finish. 3 points. By the way, for instance, the Council for Peace and Security, we army people, ex-army people, we 6 months ago, we declared openly and we recommended to the Israeli government to retreat from Lebanon without any agreement, to tell the Lebanese, look, if you will violate the agreement, then we speak differently. But as long as you will keep the agreement, we should retreat one-sided without any conditions out and coming back to the old border. For the time being, they didn't follow our advice, but I think it's closer than it was before. Yes, about the terror, and here comes the point, and we must understand, and I want to be very frank with you. Dr. Khelil said that, since the last 19, 20 months, what she refers is to the elections that we have in 96, the peace process was stopped. First of all, was the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin. This is our problem, tragedy. But then the peace process would have been proceeded. Who brought and changed the government in Israel? Not the Israelis, but the Hamas, because, the Palestinians, and I know I have many good friends among the Palestinians. I know General Rajub and everybody who is responsible for security, and they told us, if we will get orders, we can control the Hamas. We have the capability. But they thought that if they will allow terror, it will help them. And this practically stopped the process of peace. Exactly this would happen. So we must understand, terror cannot continue. We cannot and we will not accept that innocent children and adults and elderly people and women and men will be killed because somebody is extreme and doesn't accept the peace agreement. This cannot be done. And even a person of my sort, and you see our attitude, and this is the attitude of the whole council, and we have have a special good reputation in Israel because with our background, etc. But I cannot come and defend to continue the peace process, and here people are being killed without any limitations. This we must understand, and this should be stopped. I have no doubt in my mind that the peace process, and doesn't matter, it must happen, and it will take place. And I'm sure that we are closer than, far from it, by having it with the Palestinians. Again, today we have a certain government, and after the plantation agreement, yes? But I think that what the Prime Minister is doing is something which nobody expected 1 month before. And the fact that there is this employment, and they are going out from what, according to what was agreed, I'm sure that very soon we will come to the third agreement, and we will establish a state, and we will have peace between our countries. Only the problem is to believe, to see it positive, to come with solutions, and to understand that by complaining and by being against and by doing things which violate the agreement, nobody will be able to make any advance. And this should be done, the sooner the better. We had once a great leader, Dr. Theodor Herzl, as you know, the person who initiated of the Zionist movement, and he wrote a book about the Jewish state, but the end was, if you will believe, it will not be a legend. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. If you would like to ask one another a question or two, that would be just fine, and we'll proceed to questions as soon as that's completed.
You want to start?
Please.
I guess I could agree with most of what you said. Definitely I don't agree on the issue of Jerusalem, and that's the major issue that's going to be very difficult because Jerusalem is still, it means the same to Palestinians and Muslims and Christians alike, not only Muslims. Even if you think of Kaaba, Jerusalem was the first place where prayers were, it was the first, like before Mecca, the Qibla, where people would pray to. And it's the third holiest place for Muslims, and it is the most important, also the number one holy place for Christians. And Palestinians are Muslims and Christian, and also Christians of the world, not only the Palestinians. And to mention about, to comment on what you said about when Jerusalem was divided after 1948, and for Ben Gurion to have moved the capital there, of course, King Abdullah would not have moved the capital to Jerusalem. It was not, because it was not as the West Bank became a part of Jordan. It was more of an agreement between the Palestinians and the Jordanians that this part will be turned under the jurisdiction of Jordan until a solution is found for the Palestinian people. It was not considered a total part of Jordan. So King Abdullah would never have moved his capital, because to him Jordan was his country, but that was not his country. As a matter of fact, you know, we suffered as Palestinians a lot from that period with the Jordanians, because no industry, nothing, no infrastructure was established in the West Bank. It was all in Jordan. So these are my comments concerning the security. Too, I would add that you said about I know Jibril too, and he's a good friend of mine, and say hello to him from me too.
Who is it?
Rajub. You said, I'm saying his first name. So, but I don't know, I mean, to me, you know, to talk about Hamas as a lump sum, and I'm sure this is going to come in questions, and we cannot talk about Hamas as a lump sum. Hamas is an organization that has its political division and its military division. And within the military division, only one, what they call them, Azz-ad-Din al-Qassam division, which is the really violent and extremist and does the thing. And if we're going to wait and say about waiting for each one of those lunatics, the same way that happened in other situations from the settlers, and to let them dictate to us what the terms of the negotiations are, we're never going to get anywhere. And to talk about the security, according to statistics that was published by B'Tselem. B'Tselem is an Israeli human rights commission. In the last 10 years, 9 more times Palestinians, I mean, there were 9 more times Palestinians were killed by Israeli troops and settlers than Israelis killed by Palestinians. And this is a study that was done by B'Tselem, which is an Israeli human rights organization. That's my comment too. Sorry, I didn't ask questions, I answered.
What I wanted only to remind you, Dr. Khelil, I mean, because our president said that if you have questions, okay.
I know.
But doesn't matter. No, I'll answer your comments.
Well, you have your, you have.
No, so what I
instead of
suggest,
asking, I answered the questions I'm going to ask
what
you.
I suggested at the end of your comments, you should put a question mark.
Okay.
Okay, I'll answer. You want me to answer?
Yes, the implicit questions.
I beg pardon?
The implicit questions.
Yeah,
Okay.
About whichever
Jerusalem.
way you want it.
No, it's all right. I like tough questions, yes, not what's the climate and so forth. Yeah. Anyhow, about Jerusalem, with all due respect, I mean, King Abdullah and Hussein and the Palestinians considered the West Bank after 48 as a part of Jordan. I mean, there wasn't such an entity as the Palestinians, to my sorrow, yeah? So let's not forget it. So if King Abdullah would like to take his capital and to move it to Jerusalem, he was free. Nobody would, stop him or would not allow him to do it. So this we should not forget. The second point, you spoke about the closures. Yeah. What can we do? I mean, when people are being sent, and as a matter of fact, in the West Bank and in Gaza, when you go on a bus, it's very safe. In Israel, not. You are never safe because you have many times explosives and you have bombs, and we know who put them, right? So we must put a closure in order to avoid taking arms from one side to the other. I'm against closures, but there is no other way to do it. And I cannot come and complain to our government, why are you doing it? They are responsible for the security of the people. So it's an elementary thing. So to come and to complain about it, stop the terror, you will see how the closure will be stopped. About B'Tselem. B'Tselem, it's, as Dr. Khelil said, it's an Israeli organization which speaks about the violation of human rights. Yeah. And what they write is true. but we don't have B'Tselem in the side of the Palestinians, so we don't know what's there is the violation of human rights. You see, we know it only from one side. If B'Tselem would also start to make a report from the other side, we should compare this report. I want again to tell you, Dr. Khelil, and don't misunderstand me. As I mentioned before, as a matter of fact, you have, I think, in the Muslim world, you have today, how many? 250 million people, yes, around all the...
About a little bit about more than 1 billion. 1/5 of one in 5 people in the world is a Muslim.
Excellent, yeah. And the Arab nation is also, a few hundred million, right? Yeah. But you don't have 1,200 high-ranking officers retired who support peace the way that my association does. Why?
I applaud you. I applaud you for that.
Why? Can you give me an answer?
That.
Yeah. So, what I suggest, yes, we should negotiate and talk and keep and everything. For instance, just before I come to it, there was in the agreement that you will take out the Palestinian amendment, which says openly and practically the declaration of a Palestinian state that Israel should be denied. Israel is not a state. Israel should be destroyed. It's something wording. I'm not too much excited about it. But you promised, your people promised to take it out from the Oslo agreement. Nothing was done. So where's the fulfillment of the agreement? But beside this, what I suggest is that the Palestinians should take, according to my suggestion, a Palestinian state, and the sooner the better. With Jerusalem, we'll negotiate, we'll speak, we'll talk. At least it can be a very fruitful issue for the next 200 years. And we should have to debate something, yes? We cannot, you cannot solve all the problems. But don't enter in a certain, path where you complain and complain and complain. It's not productive. It doesn't bring any good. And believe me, in the moment that terror will stop, and in the moment that you will be, cooperative, you will see that we will gain the majority in Israel, and you will get a state before May 94. I have no doubt about it. Yeah.
99. I hope so.
Excuse me, 99. Yeah. Right. Yeah. No. Okay.
I think on behalf of the audience and the council in general, our sentiments are obvious. You have our deepest and most profound good wishes in the enterprise. And it is, as you suggested during your remarks, a quest for mankind's stability as well as for the people of the region. What you're doing is absolutely marvelous, and it was an enjoyable evening. We thank you very, very much.